How is it going, guys? Today we are going to be installing some SPL suspension bits on the FRS. Now, if for some reason you guys don't know about this car, this is my time attack car. I run it in the Grid Life Club TR series. It's essentially a full bolt-on NA FRS, but in this off season, we're trying to take it to the next level. And I think these SPL components are going to do just that. They're going to be a huge upgrade. If you guys are curious to follow along on this build, make sure you follow my personal channel as well. Now, these are going to get rid of the OEM soft rubber bushings and replace them with spherical bearings that are going to make things a whole lot more rigid and get rid of that deflection that can occur under load that causes your alignment to change, which we obviously don't want. They're also going to give us plenty of adjustment when we go to do our alignment, and we should shed a bit of weight as well. Today we have got the front lower control arms, we have the tie rod ends, and we've got the sway bar end links to install. Unfortunately for the front, we need to take the splitter off because it covers some of the bolts that hold the lower control arm and skid plate in place. It's kind of a pain to do, but we got to do what we got to do. I've already removed all the cotter pins to make this go a little bit quicker. We're going to start with the lower control arm and remove this nut that's holding the ball joint to the knuckle. I'm going to attempt to hammer out this ball joint, but I've replaced the castle nut that was on there with a regular nut, because sometimes if you hammer a castle nut, the pegs or whatever you want to call them on top just collapse in and completely ruin the nut. So we're going to try and avoid that. There we go. In the front, we've got a 19mm bolt and nut holding this bracket and the front of the lower control arm in place. So go ahead and remove those. The last pivot point here is going to be a 17mm bolt and nut. It's kind of tight in this area, so I'm going to use a pass-through socket on the nut side, and then just a regular socket and ratchet on the other side. Should be able to pull this thing off now. I forgot I still have the frickin' nut on here that I was whacking with the hammer. Just trying not to hit myself in the face. Oh, there we are. We're also gonna need to remove this stud. Let's see if I can break it loose. Jesus, how long is this? These do come disassembled, so I'm going to walk you through this real quick. You have the main part of the arm here, and then you have the caster arm that you can lengthen or shorten to control the caster. You have the double adjuster down here for the camber. Also take note of these two spacers. You want the large one to face the rear of the car, and when you're making adjustments, make sure that this pivot point or this bolt and nut is loose so you don't risk bending this arm. We also have anti-dive and bump steer adjustments using different spacers. That is going to vary depending on the different modifications that you have on your car. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get these installed in the car. We're going to slide the new arm into the subframe first to secure it into position. Again, make sure the larger spacer is towards the rear of the car. And we're going to reinstall this bolt and nut. We'll install the end of the caster arm next. Make sure you've got the spacers and the OEM bracket on there. If you forget to install the bracket, there's not going to be enough support and it's probably going to cause some damage, so definitely don't forget that. Reinstall this bolt as well for the bracket. I'm not going to tighten these down just yet, not until we have the rest of the arm installed. We're gonna install the stud now that connects the arm to the knuckle. This is a little bit different than most traditional setups because this stud isn't actually connected to the arm. I've got 2 jam nuts on the bottom here, and that's so that once I get this top nut on, we can lock those 2 jam nuts together and we can tighten the nut on top, and then we'll remove the jam nuts and install the nuts on the bottom. So with the jam nuts on there, I can put the torque wrench on that top nut and then have a separate socket on the jam nut to prevent it from spinning so I can torque down the top nut. We'll get these lock nuts off the bottom. Then we can install the lock nut and get everything tightened down, and we'll move to the tie rod ends. We'll move on to the tie rod ends next. You can see that I have the white line kit installed, but it's the same process. We just need to loosen the jam nut, remove the bolt that's holding the ball joint in place, and then we'll unscrew this and install the new one. Come on, baby. There we go. Whew. Same thing with this castle nut. We'll remove this and replace it with a regular nut that we can hammer on. Sometimes you can hammer on the side of the knuckle as well to break the ball joint free. We'll see what works. With the ball joint out, we can start unscrewing this. What you can do is count the amount of rotations it takes to unscrew this and use that as a guideline when you go to install the new one. It's gonna vary, of course, because they could be different lengths and such, but it's a good starting point. Now we can screw the new one in place. We're gonna do the same thing we did to install the stud on the lower control arm. So I've got the 2 jam nuts installed onto this stud. And we'll insert it into the knuckle and then get this top nut torqued down. We'll get the jam nuts off and install the locking nut. Once that's torqued down, we can take these jam nuts off and we'll install the lock nut that's gonna stay on here and get this torqued down. We'll move on to the sway bar end links to finish things up. There's 2 nuts holding these in place. These can be a pain depending on how long they've been on the car. Sometimes you can just zap these nuts off with an impact. Hey, that worked out for us. Other times you'll have to use an Allen key to get into the stud to hold it in place and prevent it from spinning, and use either in a pass-through socket or a ratcheting wrench. There's a little less room on the bottom nut here, so we're gonna have to end up doing what I said with the pass-through and Allen key. Installing the new ones is simple enough. They go in the same way they came out. We'll get this nut on here and tighten it down and then connect the bottom, and that should conclude the install portion. One thing to note when you go get these arms aligned or you're just tightening them down to go to the alignment shop, you want to make sure these spherical bearings are straight or flat across, like so. You don't want to have them looking like that, where they're crooked to one side. So make sure they're flat across before you tighten down any of the jam nuts or any of those locking collars. And that's gonna do it, guys. We've got the front lower control arms, the tie rod ends, and those sway bar end links installed. These are gonna be a huge upgrade. I cannot wait to get this car back out on the track next year. But we still have a lot to do in this off season. So like I said, if you guys are curious on following along on this build, make sure you follow my personal channel. If you guys are enjoying the content, hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time.